Blood, sweat, and tears. That's what they say builds championships. But rivalries, they build legends.
Curry helps out. Smith, pass right through the hands of Curry. James, the two-handed slam.
They've given us stories we'll tell for generations. And today we're breaking down what makes the greatest NBA rivalries tick and why they matter so much. This is how basketball feuds become legends. Los Angeles Lakers versus Boston Celtics. When we talk about NBA rivalries, there's no better place to start than with the Lakers and Celtics. This isn't just a rivalry, it's the rivalry. These two titans of the hardwood have been going at it for decades, and their battles have become the stuff of legend. It's the 1980s, and the NBA is exploding in popularity. On one side, we've got the Showtime Lakers, led by the charismatic Magic Johnson. On the other, the gritty Celtics, spearheaded by Larry Bird. These two teams met in the finals 3 times in 4 years, and each matchup was like a heavyweight title fight.
Inside.
But this rivalry goes way beyond the 80s. It's a clash that spans generations, from Russell and Chamberlain in the 60s to Kobe and Pierce in the 2000s. The Lakers and Celtics have faced each other a record 12 times in the NBA Finals, with the Celtics holding an edge at 9-3. What makes this rivalry so special? It's not just about the games, it's about the contrast. The Lakers represent the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, while the Celtics embody the blue-collar toughness of Boston. It's East Coast versus West Coast, tradition versus flair. When these two teams step on the court, it's not just a game, it's a clash of basketball philosophies. Chicago Bulls versus Detroit Pistons. Now, let's shift our focus and talk about a rivalry that was less about finesse and more about, well, pain. The late 80s and early 90s saw the rise of the bad boys Detroit Pistons, and standing in their way were Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. This wasn't just basketball, this was war. The Pistons, led by Isaiah Thomas and Bill Laimbeer, played a physical brand of basketball that pushed the rules to their limits. Their strategy against the Bulls? Simple. Stop Jordan at any cost. And by any cost, we mean elbows, hard fouls, and the infamous Jordan rules. For years, the Pistons were the Bulls' nemesis, eliminating them from the playoffs in 1988, 1989, and 1990.
25-21. Chicago with the lead. Vinny with the layup.
It was brutal, it was physical, and it was personal. Jordan and his teammates had to endure not just defeat, but humiliation at the hands of the Pistons. But here's where the story gets good. In 1991, the Bulls finally broke through. They didn't just beat the Pistons, they swept them. With the clock ticking down and defeat inevitable, the bad boys made one final defiant statement. Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, and Mark Aguirre refused to play out those last 7.9 seconds, marching off the court without a single handshake for their conquerors. Only Joe Dumars and John Sally broke ranks, offering a brief congratulations to the Bulls. The changing of the guard was complete, but Detroit wouldn't go quietly into the night. Chicago rode this momentum all the way to the NBA Finals, where they toppled Magic Johnson's Lakers to claim their first championship. New York Knicks versus Miami Heat. Next up, let's move on to a rivalry that burned hot and fast. The New York Knicks versus the Miami Heat. This wasn't a decades-long feud like some others, but what it lacked in longevity, it more than made up for in intensity. It's the late 90s, and both teams are fighting for the Eastern Conference supremacy. The Knicks, led by Patrick Ewing and the tough-as-nails duo of John Starks and Charles Oakley, embodied the gritty spirit of New York. On the other side, we had the Miami Heat with Alonzo Mourning and Tim Hardaway, bringing that South Beach swagger to the court. What made this rivalry so compelling was the sheer animosity between these teams.
And now they have to fight for this series. P.J. Brown.
It wasn't just about basketball, it was personal. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and sometimes that's exactly what it felt like they were trying to do to each other on the court. Remember the 1997 playoffs? That's when this rivalry reached its boiling point. In Game 5, a fight broke out that resulted in multiple suspensions. The series went to 7 games, with the Heat ultimately prevailing, but that was just the beginning. These teams met in the playoffs 4 consecutive years, and each series was a knockdown, drag-out affair. Low-scoring games, physical play, and more than a few punches thrown. This rivalry had it all. It wasn't pretty basketball, but it was compelling, edge-of-your-seat stuff that had fans in both cities living and dying with every possession. The Knicks-Heat rivalry showed us that sometimes the fiercest competitors aren't born out of long histories, but out of perfect storms of personalities, playing styles, and sheer competitive fire. Cleveland Cavaliers versus Golden State Warriors. Now, let's fast forward to more recent times. If you were watching basketball in the mid-2010s, you couldn't escape the Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Golden State Warriors. This rivalry gave us 4 consecutive NBA Finals matchups from 2015 to 2018, something we'd never seen before. On one side, we had LeBron James returning to his hometown Cavs with a mission to bring a championship to Cleveland. On the other, the Warriors, led by the Splash Brothers, Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson, were redefining how the game was played with their three-point shooting prowess. What made this rivalry so captivating was the contrast in styles. The Cavs, with LeBron's physically dominant play and Kyrie Irving's clutch performances against the Warriors' revolutionary small ball lineup and lights-out shooting.
Irving puts it up. It's good. Kyrie Irving from downtown.
It was like watching 2 different versions of basketball excellence collide. The 2016 Finals stands out as the pinnacle of this rivalry. The Warriors, coming off a record-breaking 73-win season, took a 3-1 lead in the series. But then, the unthinkable happened. Led by LeBron's heroics, including the block, one of the most iconic plays in NBA history, the Cavs stormed back to win in 7 games, breaking Cleveland's 52-year championship drought. This rivalry wasn't just about traditional big men anymore. It was about versatility, shooting, and superstar performances. And it gave us some of the most memorable moments in recent basketball history. From Kyrie's clutch 3 in Game 7 to Kevin Durant's dagger in the 2017 Finals. Boston Celtics versus Philadelphia 76ers. Now, let's take a trip back in time to one of the NBA's oldest and most storied rivalries, the Boston Celtics versus the Philadelphia 76ers. This isn't just a rivalry, it's a piece of basketball history that spans decades and has featured some of the greatest players to ever step on the court. It all started in the 1960s when the titanic clashes between Bill Russell's Celtics and Wilt Chamberlain's 76ers. These were 2 of the most dominant centers in NBA history, going head-to-head in epic battles.
Lucas puts Philadelphia ahead.
The Celtics often came out on top, but the 76ers' 1967 title run, ending Boston's streak of 8 straight championships, remains one of the most celebrated moments in Philadelphia sports history. But this rivalry didn't end with Russell and Wilt. It evolved and found new life in the 1980s with Larry Bird and Julius Dr. J. Irving. Who can forget the 1981 Eastern Conference Finals, where the Celtics came back from a 3-1 deficit to win the series, or the regular season brawl between Bird and Dr. J in 1984. These moments are etched in the minds of basketball fans everywhere. What makes this rivalry so special is its longevity and the way it's woven into the fabric of East Coast basketball. Every game between these teams feels like it carries the weight of history. And let's not forget the more recent chapters, the battles between Paul Pierce's Celtics and Allen Iverson's Sixers in the early 2000s, or the emotional series in 2012 when the 76ers pushed the Big Three Celtics to 7 games. This rivalry has stood the test of time, reinventing itself with each new generation of stars. Los Angeles Lakers versus San Antonio Spurs. Last, but certainly not least, let's talk about a rivalry that dominated the Western Conference for over a decade, the Los Angeles Lakers versus the San Antonio Spurs. This wasn't just a battle for conference supremacy, it was a clash between two of the most successful franchises in modern NBA history.
Off the dribble, Reed open, head of the key, and the slam.
From 1999 to 2014, either the Lakers or the Spurs represented the Western Conference in the NBA Finals an astounding 13 out of 16 times. That's dominance on a level rarely seen in professional sports, and when these two teams met in the playoffs, it was always must-see TV. On one side, we had the flashy Lakers, led by the dynamic duo of Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, and later by Kobe and Pau Gasol. They played with a flair that matched the Hollywood setting. On the other side, we had the fundamentally sound Spurs, guided by the steady hand of Tim Duncan and the tactical genius of Coach Greg Popovich. It was like watching a chess match played at 100 miles per hour. What made this rivalry unique was the mutual respect between the teams. Unlike some of the more heated rivalries we've discussed, this one was characterized by a recognition of each other's greatness. Kobe Bryant once said that the Spurs brought out the best in him and the Lakers, and you could see that in the intensity of their matchups. Some of the most memorable moments in 2000s basketball came from this rivalry. The Derek Fisher 0.4 second shot in the 2004 playoffs, the Lakers comeback from a 0-2 deficit in the 2004 semifinals, the Spurs dethroning the three-peat Lakers in 2003, each game felt like it could swing the balance of power in the West. This rivalry showed us that greatness can come in different forms. The Lakers with their star power and dramatic flair, the Spurs with their team-first mentality and tactical precision. Both approaches led to championships, and when they collided, it was basketball at its finest. Which rivalry had you on the edge of your seat? Is there a matchup we didn't cover that you think deserves recognition? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're always breaking down the biggest stories and trends in the NBA, and you won't want to miss our future videos. And hey, while you're at it, smash that bell icon too. That way, you'll be notified as soon as we drop new content. Trust me, with how quickly things change in the NBA, you'll want to stay up to date.